What's up, Internet? It is that time of year once again. You know the time. The time where we reminisce about the games we played over the past 12 months and then assign them an arbitrary number to try and explain how much we like it. Game of the Year time. And I have to say, this year, gaming-wise, was actually pretty good. With my Saturn import card, I not only delved further down the rabbit hole of import games, but I also effectively increased my Saturn library 10 times over. And I got introduced to not one, not two, but 3 series that I really want to start collecting for, big time. But unfortunately, this year was not all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, personal problems aside, and trust me, there were a lot of them this year, gaming-wise, there's always been one problem that's been bothering me, and it's been increasingly so every year, and that is new releases. Seriously, over the past 10 years, I've been noticing a diminishing number of awesome games to get every year. That's why I did a top 5 Game of the Year list instead of a top 10 last year. But you know what? I just realized something. This is my channel, I get to make the rules. So now, Game of the Year is any game I played this year that I think was good. Yeah. Alright, that way we get new games, old games, plus I get a full 10. There you go. You're welcome. Look at me, the problem solver. But like last year, there are 2 games I'd like to make special mention of, mainly because I can't actually record them, but I want to give them recognition for being able to be on this list, despite the fact that I can't actually put them on the list because I don't have footage for them. So, mass amounts of shoutouts to Undertale, one of the most interesting takes on the RPG I've seen since Opuna on the Wii, and one of the few games that I can ever say got a response out of me just by playing it. Just take my word for it, go pick it up, it's great. Likewise, just automatically go to Good Old Games, drop $10, and pick up my other special mention, the 1995 version of TIE Fighter. It took many, many years for us to finally get a digital copy, but we did it, people, and it's just as awesome as it always was. Anyway, special mentions now done, let's get on with it with number 10. Rodea the Sky Soldier. Wii version. Okay, yes, I understand that the 3DS version is a giant bubbling load of toss. And likewise, I also know that the Wii U version is basically just an upscaled 3DS version. But the Wii version is actually fun. It's fast-paced flying action in a bright, colorful, interesting world, and it reminds me of one of my favorite games of all time, Nights into Dreams. But there is one massive problem with this game, and it's the only thing that would probably stop it from being on a best of Wii list. And that is, over the course of 5 years that this game was sitting around completed and not being put out to stores, no one ever raised their hand and asked why there was no camera control. Moreover, no one asked why what little camera control there was in this game directly interfered with the main mechanics. That said, if you can actually get past the camera, this game is a ton of fun, but as it stands, it's probably just going to sit as one of those weird, highly sought-after collectibles that isn't worth the price it commands on eBay, simply because the only way to have it was to buy a first-run print of the Wii U version. Kinda sad, but at least it was interesting. Following that, we have number 9, with Giant Citizen Kabuto. Okay, I'm going to be completely honest here. I bought this game at a garage sale for $1. Knowing only that it was on the list of games I had seen and kind of wanted to know more about. In fact, when I bought it, I thought I was getting a completely different game called Outcast. And because it was a different game than I thought it was, I was initially very disappointed with this game. I then went and bought Outcast on Steam for $1, and then saw this game for what it really was. It's a fun, witty, interesting take on a third-person shooter / RTS. And it's got some of the most brilliant writing I've seen on the PS2. Granted, this game does do a lot wrong, and it is awkward in a lot of ways, but it's totally worth the price I paid for it, and it's totally one of the games you should look into for the PS2, if you're into the more interesting and unique side of games. Number 8. One of 2 Taito titles I'm actually familiar with from my childhood because I rented it once. I actually was looking for this game for many, many years, and just couldn't find it simply because I misremembered the title. This is Ninja Warriors, and after finally being reunited with this game and paying a stupid amount of money for it, I can say this: it's a subpar beat-em-up. But it's a subpar beat-em-up with a lot of style and ninja robots. And for some people, that'll be enough. Do I think it's worth the value that it commands? No! But It is a fun game if you like classic beat-em-ups. Just don't go into this one expecting it to be worth like the 150 it commands. And I mean, come on. It's the game with human blender mode in it. How was I not going to put it on the list? Come on! Following Ninja Warriors, we have number 7, Fallout 4. A game that, while I knew nothing about, I was prepared to put at number 1 just before I played it. Then I played it. That's not to say this game is bad by any means or measure, but it's just massively disappointing, especially if you compare it to Fallout 3. This game does the whole open world thing like every other Bethesda RPG, but there's far less unique stuff to find in it. I mean, seriously, I think I've explored pretty much every single environment in this game. Only one of it was remotely memorable, and it was a throwback to Fallout 3. They have significantly less vaults, the story is completely naff, doing that stupid thing Fallout New Vegas did where it cuts the story halfway through the campaign and then just forces you to run errands for one of 4 different factions, and then they decide to make the factions all sort of grayscale in morality, but it's done so clumsily that it just makes them all look like assholes. Seriously, I didn't want to help any of them. And by the end of it, I went with the guys that were typically considered the villains just because they kinda seemed like the only people who were trying to do something for the greater good. Likewise, the story was handled so poorly that unlike virtually every other Fallout game in existence, except maybe that PS2 thing that we don't talk about, it's the only one that doesn't ever really address your choices. Because by the end of it, your choices didn't matter. How much bullshit is that? And I think most damning of all, at least in my opinion, for a large open world Bethesda RPG, is this game has the fewest number of unique weapons in it. And I think that's to focus on the crafting element, but the crafting element sucked. It meant that you had to carry way too much crap around at any one time. And the only other reason to do it was to build bases. And bases were basically completely pointless, seeing as it meant you had to invest X amount of time into one corner of a map in a game that was supposed to be about exploring as much of the map as possible. That's so incredibly counterintuitive. That said, it was a fun open world game that did take away several hours of my life. I'd still say wait for it on sale though. With number 6 we have Saints Row 2. Alright, I'm not gonna lie, I started the Saints Row franchise with number 3, and I think that it had one of the nicest aesthetics ever. I love that bright comic booky style. But I'm gonna make no bones about it, Saints Row 2 is infinitely better. You've got way more customization. You've got the wackiness, sure, but it's in contrast with a much more serious tone, which makes the insanity of it all pop out a hell of a lot more. Every single corner of the world has its own unique flair, as opposed to all of Steelport, which felt like one giant environment that just sort of felt bland, comparatively. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most was there was just tons of secret environments in this game. And I had just a balls-out crazy fun time just trying to find all these hidden areas and just faff about in them. Totally worth it. With number 5, we have to thank Amazon Germany for my ability to actually receive it. We have Dodonpachi Resurrection on the Xbox 360. This is the first time I've ever played a bullet hell shmup in my life. And I gotta say, while I'm equally awful at it as with every other shmup I've ever played, it is an insane fun time. It's high speed, it's super, super pretty. It's got an amazing soundtrack, and it's just high-speed fun. If you like arcade-style games, this one is totally worth the amount of money it costs to import it. So don't hesitate, just grab it. Tons of fun. Number 4 makes me think this is what it's like to be reunited with an old friend. I mean, I assume I don't have friends, so I kinda just have to work on the assumption of the feeling here, but number 4 is Harvest Moon 64. The game that got me into my favorite life sim farming simulation type game all the way back on the N64. And while it's relatively hard to find and costs a stupid amount of money, I think it was totally worth it just for nostalgia alone. Now if you don't have nostalgia for this game, absolutely not. I would say go grab Friends of Mineral Town because it's probably the best one. But honestly, part of me wants to say this one's the best one in the series because it just feels so much different than the rest. Yes, it certainly shows its age by not having, like, backpack macros, and characters not really being stuck to a schedule so much as just sort of teleporting around at X periods of time, but something about it just feels wholly unique compared to the rest. Maybe it's the fact that you have to build a giant deck outside your house. Maybe it's the fact you can put chickens on your roof and they'll never die. Or, maybe it's just a photo album. But regardless of what it is, this game is definitely special to me, and I'm totally glad I finally have a copy. With number 3, Special Agent Rico Suave is back in Faffing About Simulator 2015. It fixes literally every problem Just Cause 2 had. The only problems? Well, you're limited on your resources, although that gets fixed over time. But most importantly to me, it feels like there's just less to do. There's less settlements, they're less densely packed, and there just overall doesn't seem like there's as much to do in each one. Maybe it's because there's less stupid collecting. But either way, if you love Just Cause 2, you'll love this game. It's super, super pretty. And really, there's very little negative to say about it. Although I am confused as to why Rico is now Italian. Maybe they'll explain that in Just Cause 4. Following up Just Cause 3 is the sequel, kinda, to one of the best Wii games of all time. And as of now, it's one of the best Wii U games of all time. This is Xenoblade Cross, and I gotta say, I love it. It's a giant open-world RPG, which is the one thing I loved about Xenoblade more than anything. But now they've got elements of movement and climbing around, and it almost feels kind of like they took Crackdown and made it into an RPG, except less stupid collectibles. No, wait, actually they have more stupid collectibles, but they're kind of put there for a reason. The only things I don't like about this game are the fact that they've gotten rid of the ability to understand exactly what you need before you need it for side quests. And I'm guessing that's a story-related thing as opposed to being able to see the future, but I could think of a couple ways to write around that, and it would have totally been worth it just for the sake of making side quests a hell of a lot easier. As well, the only other problem I have with this game, and I knew it as soon as I could pick my character's voice actor, was my character was not going to be all that big a part in the story. And it really kinda isn't. Weird thing is, it's sort of relegated to an almost sort of MMO side character type thing, a la White Knight Chronicles, and I don't like that, but you've still got a little more screen time than that, so they try and include you as best you can without ever being able to say anything in the plot. Yes, that's annoying, but you know what? I'm too busy skelling to care. Here we go. My number 1 game of the year. Alright, loath as I am to ever give any exposure to Square Enix, for the almost certainty that this video will get flagged by them, I gotta admit, my game of the year is a Squaresoft RPG, circa the Super Famicom, called Live Alive. This game is interesting because not only do you have 8 separate characters that all have their own stories, but each character's story takes a different thematic and gameplay genre, all while incorporating completely different mechanics. And yes, while 2 of the chapters, the near future and present, are basically completely throwaway, the others totally make it worthwhile, and by the end of it, you're totally invested. If that's not a big enough recommendation for you, let's put it this way. This is one of 2 import RPGs I got. I got it at the same time along with the much more well-known Terranigma. I've still never finished Terranigma. I'm still playing Live Alive, despite beating it 2 or 3 times already. And if that wasn't enough, with the exception of maybe Undertale, this is the only game I've played in the past 5, maybe 10 years that's ever gotten a reaction out of me. People who've played it, you know what I'm talking about. But I actually jumped out of my seat saying, "You can't do that," and then they did it. And by the end of it, you were so wrapped up in the story, you wanted to see how it ended. And that's why this game gets number 1. It's not perfect, but the story totally makes it worthwhile. Alright, and that's my top 10 Game of the Year list. Hopefully Square Enix has not banned this video in every country ever because I used footage from one of their games. More than like 25 years old at this point. I'm hoping, but I'm not wildly hopeful. Damn you, Square Enix. But that said, there's tons of games I didn't play this year. Could be because I fundamentally refuse to pay for something like Super Mario Maker and I refuse to support Metal Gear Solid 5. Or it could be simply because I'd never heard of it or I just sort of missed it. Like, this is the first year since Disgaea 2 I've missed a Disgaea game. How nuts is that? But because there's so many games I don't know about, why don't you tell me what your favorites were? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this list. And here's to next year. And here's to a ton of kick-ass games in the future.